In the black heart of the North Atlantic, where the sea is colder than memory itself, a giant once stood. The Ocean Ranger, a floating fortress of steel and ambition, built to defy nature, to drill where men were never meant to stand. But on a storm-torn February night in 1982, that defiance was tested. Waves rose higher than houses, wind screamed like a living thing, and in a matter of hours the most advanced oil rig in the world simply disappeared. 84 men vanished without a trace. No survivors, no answers, only questions carried by the wind. It wasn't just an oil rig that sank that night. It was humanity's illusion of control over the ocean itself. Before it vanished beneath the Atlantic, the Ocean Ranger was more than just an oil platform. It was a marvel. Towering nearly 400 feet above the waves, it was hailed as the unsinkable city at sea, a floating monument to engineering triumph. Built to endure the worst storms nature could summon, it represented the new frontier of human ambition, a symbol of courage, progress and pride shared across nations. From Newfoundland to Dublin, from the engineers in offices to the men aboard, there was faith. Faith in machines, in training, in numbers that promised safety. But faith, as history often proves, is fragile when placed against the sea. On February 14, 1982, as Valentine's Day storms rolled across the North Atlantic, that faith was tested in the most brutal way imaginable. And by dawn, the ocean had claimed its debt, reminding the world that no matter how far we advance, the sea always decides who stays afloat. The calm before the storm, the evening before the storm. The Ocean Ranger drifted under a grey sky, calm, steady and self-assured. 84 men moved through their routines with quiet precision. Some called home over the radio, others played cards or brewed coffee in the mess hall. Outside, the sea was restless, but the crew had seen worse. They trusted the rig, massive, modern, invincible. By nightfall, the barometer began to drop. Winds sharpened, the waves swelled higher. A cold front from the Canadian Arctic collided with Atlantic moisture, and the storm gathered power. Still, operations continued. The crew logged instruments, adjusted valves, and stayed focused, men working miles above an unforgiving abyss. As midnight approached, the first reports of equipment failure came through. Minor at first, barely worth concern. A window cracked. Pressure gauges flickered. Then the control room noticed an alarming tilt. In that moment, a silent question passed among the men. Could the Ocean Ranger really fail? By 1:00 a.m., the radio crackled with static and distress. The storm had arrived, roaring, relentless, alive. The night the ocean swallowed steel in the early hours of February 15, 1982, the North Atlantic turned from wild to monstrous. Waves towered over 20 meters high, crashing against the rig's structure like fists of iron. Inside the Ocean Ranger, alarms screamed through the corridors. Lights flickered, power systems faltered, and the men, trained for everything except this, scrambled to understand what was happening. A window in the control room shattered under the pressure of the storm. Freezing seawater poured in, short-circuiting vital electrical systems. The ballast controls arm, the very heart that kept the rig balanced, went dark. Without power, the Ocean Ranger was blind. Radio messages broke through the static. We're taking on water. We're listing to the side. We need immediate assistance. Nearby ships heard the distress call, among them the Seaforth Highlander and the Bolton Tor. But the storm was too violent to reach them in time. For hours, the crew fought to keep the platform alive, sealing doors, pumping water, clinging to the belief that the structure built to withstand anything could still survive. But the sea had made its decision. At 1:30 a.m., the Ocean Ranger began to list sharply. Men tried to launch lifeboats in the freezing blackness, but each was smashed by the waves. The rig tilted, groaned, and then disappeared beneath the storm. By dawn, only debris floated where 84 men had stood. No bodies, no survivors, just the endless grey horizon, indifferent and quiet. The most advanced oil rig on Earth was gone. Swallowed whole by the sea it sought to command, aftermath and investigation. When the storm subsided, rescue helicopters swept across the Atlantic dawn, but all they found was wreckage. Steel fragments, broken lifeboats, empty survival suits drifting on waves. The Ocean Ranger had vanished, and with it 84 men. Fathers, sons, brothers. The entire crew was lost. Families gathered on shore, clinging to hope that someone might have survived in the freezing water. But as hours turned into days, hope turned to mourning. In Newfoundland, the news spread like wildfire. Disbelief, then anger, then grief that settled deep into the hearts of those who lived by the sea. An inquiry was launched almost immediately. Investigators pieced together what little evidence the storm had left behind. What they found was haunting. A series of preventable failures. Poor design, missing safety procedures, inadequate training, and a lack of backup systems. The ballast control room, where the rig's balance was maintained, was fatally vulnerable. One broken window, one electrical failure, and the entire platform became a trap. Corporate promises of unsinkable safety were shattered. The Ocean Ranger disaster forced governments and oil companies to rewrite offshore regulations worldwide. Lifeboat standards, evacuation drills, and design safety systems were overhauled. The legacy of the lost more than 4 decades later. The name Ocean Ranger still echoes across the North Atlantic, not as a monument of power, but as a memory of humility. In coastal towns, plaques bear the names of the 84 men who never returned. Each one represents a family that learned the cruel truth of life at sea. That technology may evolve, but the ocean never forgets. The tragedy reshaped how nations viewed offshore work. It sparked reforms, inspired memorials, and reminded the world that progress demands responsibility. Engineers today still study the Ocean Ranger, not for its design, but for its failure. Because within that failure lies every lesson humanity must remember when it dares to challenge the deep. In Ireland, where the sea is both provider and predator, the story of the Ocean Ranger feels deeply familiar. It is a story of courage, of loss, and of remembrance. A story that whispers through every Atlantic wind that sweeps the coast.